We will be solving quadratic equations by factoring. On your notes handout, it just has the word problem, so go ahead and flip it over. And we need to do problems 1 through 10 on the back side of your notes handout. Flip it over.
You gotta write this?
You will have to write it all. So write small so you can put 10 problems on here. Okay, so. And you pay attention, let's focus. Okay, the steps. Here are the steps for solving quadratic equations. Step 1. You need to write the equation in standard form.
Now I gotta erase it.
Now I gotta erase it.
Write the equation in standard form. Now, as a reminder, standard form for quadratics is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So you have to have 0 on one side. Everything else moves to the other side, starting with the highest power. So x squared, then x, then a constant. Step 2. Factor out the greatest common factor. You got one more time. So factor out the GCF. I will relocate.
When you say GCF?
GCF, greatest common factor. Step 3, factor the remaining expression. Step 4, set the factors equal to 0. And the final step is to solve. So 5 steps. Step 1, write the equation in standard form. It has to equal 0. Everything else has to be moved to the other side, starting with the x squared, then the x, then the constant. Step 2, factor out the greatest common factor. Step 3, factor the remaining expression. Step 4, set the factors equal to 0. Step 5 is to solve. So looking at number 1, you will have to copy it down. Number 1, the instructions say to solve. Our quadratic equation is 3x squared minus 12x equals 0. So copy down the equation. 3x squared minus 12x equals 0. Now follow those 5 steps. Step 1, is that equation in standard form? Yes, it equals 0 and the x squared is first, followed by the x. So step 1 is complete. Step 2, what is step 2? Factor out the GCF. So what is the greatest common factor between the 3x squared and the 12x? 3x. So factor out the 3x. And 3x times what gives us 3x squared? X. 3x times what gives us negative 12x? Negative 4. So that's step 2. We factored out the GCF. Step 3 is to factor the remaining expression. But if you look inside the parentheses, x minus 4, if it's a binomial, you need to to check to see if it's a difference of squares. It's a difference, but is x a perfect square? No. So we can't do step 3, there's nothing more to factor. So step 4, what does step 4 say? That the factors equal to 0. So these are the two factors, the 3x and the x minus 4. Both of those need to be set equal to 0. So 3x, set it equal to 0. X minus 4, set it equal to 0. And that gets us to step 5, and what is step 5? Solve. So for that first equation, how do I get rid of that 3? Divide both sides by 3, and 0 divided by 3 is 0. So our first answer is 0. For the second equation, what's the opposite of subtract 4? Add 4 to both sides. That gives us x is equal to 4. So 0 and 4 are the two solutions to that equation. That's the answer, 0 and 4. Okay, number 2. Copy down number 2. We have x squared minus 9x plus 18 equals 0. Step 1. Is that equation in standard form? Yes, it is. It's equal to 0, and we have x squared followed by x followed by the constant. Step 2, is there a GCF? No, there's not a GCF because not all of them have an x. Step 3 is factor the remaining expression. So we need to factor the expression that's on the left side of the equal sign. Since it's a 1x squared, put your 2 sets of parentheses and bring down the equals 0. To factor that, I know x times x will give me the x squared out front. Now we need to find those two missing numbers. So if you recall way back to Unit 4 when we were factoring, we want two numbers that multiply to the last one and add to the middle one. So we need two numbers to multiply to 18. So we have 1 times 18, 2 times 9, and 3 times 6. Now I'm looking at the middle term. What do we want to add up to? Negative 9. We're looking at my factors. Which factors even add to 9? 3 and 6. But right now it's positive 9. How do I make that become negative 9? Make both of these negative. So this will be x minus 3 and x minus 6. So we just did step 3. We factored the expression. What is step 4? Set the factors equal to 0. So x minus 3, set it equal to 0. X minus 6, set it equal to 0. What is step 4? Sorry, it's step 5, the last step. Solve. So how do I get rid of the subtract 3? Add 3 to both sides, so what's our first answer? X equals 3. And add 6 to both sides, and you are correct. We get x equals 6. So 3 and 6 are the two solutions to that quadratic equation. Number 3. Copy down problem 3. We have 2x squared minus 9x minus 5 equals 0. What is step 1? We factored before, now we're just combining factoring with solving equations. Step 1, what is step 1? Write it in standard form. Is that equation in standard form? Yes. What is step 2? Yeah, is there a GCF between 2, 9, and 5? No. So we move to step 3. We need to factor that expression that remains on the left side of the equal sign. Since it's bigger than a 1x squared, you are correct. We'll have to do the AC method. So we need to multiply A times C. So what's 2 times negative 5? Negative 10. So if I need to multiply and get a negative, what does that tell me about one of the factors? One of them has to be negative. So I'm going to have negative 1 times 10, negative 2 times 5, negative 5 times 2, negative 10 times,
Wait, what? Are you
negative 10 times 1. Now, where did the negative 10 come from? It's bigger than a 1x squared. So if it's bigger than a 1x squared, you have to multiply A times C. So 2 times negative 5, that gave us the negative 10. Now, we still want to add to the middle term, so what do we have to add up to? Negative 9. So in that list, which pair adds to negative 9? Negative 10 and 1. So bring down the 2x squared, and we are going to split the middle term. So instead of negative 9x, we're going to use these two values. So we'll have a negative 10x and a 1x. So negative 10x plus 1x, bring down the minus 5, and it equals 0. Then once we have our 4 terms, do you remember what we do next? Group them. So we need to group the first 2, group the last 2. Looking at the first group, what's the GCF? 2x, and what goes in the parentheses? X minus 5. And looking at the second group, what's the GCF for the second group? 1. And what would go in the parentheses? X minus 5. Now write your 2 factors. What is the common binomial factor? X minus 5. And the factor with the GCF would be 2x plus 1. Bring down the equals 0. So all of that work, we're just to step 3. What is step 4? Set the factor equal to 0. So x minus 5, set it equal to 0. 2x plus 1, set it equal to 0. So for this first equation, we'll need to add 5 to both sides. And what is our first answer? X equals 5. And for the second equation, what would be our first step? Subtract 1 to both sides. That gives us 2x equals negative 1. And how do we get rid of the 2 out front? Divide both sides by 2. Our second answer would be x equals negative 1/2. So 5 and negative 1/2.
How many questions do you have?
Number 4, copy down number 4. We have x squared minus 49 equals 0. What is step 1? Is that in standard form? Yes. What is step 2? Is there a GCF? No, there's not a GCF. So step 3, factor the remaining expression. So we need to factor the expression that's on the left side of the equal sign. And what is this thing called?
Perfect square.
A difference of squares. So put your 2 sets of parentheses and the equals 0 and take your square root. So what's the square root of x squared? So we'll have an x and an x. One is a plus, the other is a minus. And what is the square root of 49? 7. So x plus 7, x minus 7. What is step 4? Set the factors equal to 0. So what? Start with the first one, x plus 7. Set it equal to 0. X minus 7. Set it equal to 0. So what would the first answer be? X equals negative 7. Now the second answer would be x equals positive 7. So negative 7 and positive 7. Number 5, we have x squared minus 8x equals negative 12. Make sure we're writing this equation down. X squared minus 8x equals negative 12. What is step 1? Write it in standard form. Is this in standard form? No, because it does not equal 0. So what has to move? That negative 12. What happens to the negative 12 when we move it to the other side? It becomes positive 12. So x squared minus 8x plus 12 equals 0. What is step 2? GCF. Is there a GCF? No. What is step 3? Factor the expression that's on the left-hand side. So if it's a 1x squared, go ahead and put your 2 sets of parentheses. And we need to find 2 numbers that multiply to what? 12. So we're going to have 1 times 12, 2 times 6, or 3 times 4. What do we need to add up to? Negative 8. Which pair are you going to add to 8? 2 and 6. So right now it's positive 8. Make it a negative 8 by changing both of those to minus 6. So one of these would be x minus 2. The other factor would be x minus 6. After you factor it, what is step 4? Set the factors equal to 0. So x minus 2. Set it equal to 0. X minus 6. Set it equal to 0. So what would the first answer be? X equals 2. And what would the second answer be? X equals 6. So 2 and 6. Number 6, x squared equals 4x plus 12. X squared equals 4x plus 12. What is step 1? Get it in standard form. So does this equal 0? No. The x squared is good. But what happens to 4x when I move it to the other side? So it becomes negative 4x. What happens to the positive 12 when I move it to the other side? It becomes negative 12. Now it equals 0. I want you to finish solving number 6. Solve that quadratic by factoring. Since this is a 1x squared, we need 2 numbers that multiply to what? Negative 12. And they also need to add to negative 4. So what were those 2 numbers? Negative 6 and 2. one of the factors was x minus 6, the other factor was x plus 2. So that's the correct factors form.
It can be negative 2 plus 6.
Negative 2 and positive 6,
positive.
those add up to positive 4, so we can't use that there. So yes, it would only be negative 6 and positive 2. What is step 4? Set the factors equal to 0. So take your x minus 6, set it equal to 0. Take your x plus 2, set it equal to 0. So what is our first answer? Add 6 to both sides, and it would be x equals positive 6. And subtract 2 to both sides. And what is our second answer? Negative 2. So 6 and negative 2. Next one, number 7. We have 4x squared equals 25. 4x squared equals 25. What is step 1? Is it in standard form? No, what does it have to equal? 0. So the 25, move it to the other side, and what happens to the 25 when we move it to the other side? It becomes negative 25. Now it equals 0. Now it's good to go. Step 2, what is step 2? Is there a GCF here? No. So step 3, how do I factor that binomial? What is that binomial called? Difference of squares. You only do the AC method if it's binomial. Now take the square roots. What's the square root of 4x squared? 2x and a 2x. One is a plus, the other is a minus, and what is the square root of 25? 5. So 2x plus 5, 2x minus 5. What is step 4? Set the factors equal to 0. So 2x plus 5, set it equal to 0. 2x minus 5, set it equal to 0. At the first equation, what would be the first step to solve for x? Subtract 5 to both sides. So that gives us 2x equals negative 5. Divide by 2. And we'll leave that improper, so x equals negative 5 halves. Or in decimal form, that would be negative 2.5. And for the second equation, what would be the first step to solve for x? Add 5 to both sides. So that gives us 2x equals 5. Divide both sides by 2, and what is the second answer? 5 halves. So negative 5 halves, positive 5 halves are the two solutions. Number 8. We have 4x squared plus 25 equals 20x. What is step 1? Yeah, get it to standard form, so we need to move the 20x to the other side. What happens to the 20x when we move it to the other side? It becomes negative 20x. Plus 25 equals 0. What's next? Yes. Step 2 is our GCS? No. So step 3, we need to factor this. If it's bigger than a 1x squared, we have to use the AC method, so that is correct. We have to multiply the 4 and the 25. And 4 times 25 is 100. Factors of 100, I could have 1 times 100, 2 times 50, 4 times 25, 5 times 20, 6, 7, 8 times do 10. 10 times what? 10. Hopefully that'll get it. What do we have to add up to? Negative 20. Which pair even adds to 20? 10 and 10 right now is positive 20. I need to make it negative 20. So both of those have to be negative. Bring down the 4x squared. We're splitting up the middle term using our two numbers. So this would be negative 10x and a negative 10x plus 25 equals 0. Once you have your four terms, what do we do next? Group them. So group the first two, group the last two. Keep a plus sign in the middle. Looking at that first group, what's the GCF? 2x. And what would go in the parentheses? 2x minus 5. For the second group, notice the first one is a negative. So if the first one is a negative, the GCF is automatically negative. And what's the rest of that GCF? Negative 5. And what would go in the parentheses? 2x minus 5. Now we're ready to write the two factors. And what is the common binomial factor? 2x minus 5. What are the GCFs? 2x minus 5. Okay, all of that work, and we're just at step 3. What is step 4? Set the factors equal to 0. So 2x minus 5, set it equal to 0. 2x minus 5, set it equal to 0. What do you notice about those? They're the same, so do I really need to solve the same equation 2 times? No. So just do it 1 time. So looking at the first equation, what would be our first step to solve for x? Add 5 to both sides. So that gives us 2x equals 5. Last step would be divide by 2. And what is our answer to both of those equations? 5/2. So if you have the same factor, you don't have to solve the same equation twice. Just solve it once. Okay, number 9 will be the last one that we'll do on this sheet, and then we'll flip over to those word problems. Number 9, make sure you copy it down. It's 48x minus 32 equals 18x squared. Now, normally we want it to equal 0. But what happens to the 18x squared if I move it to the other side? It becomes negative 18x squared, then I'd have to factor out a GCF of negative. I don't want to do all that work. So it's actually going to be faster for us to move these two to the other side. So if I move these two to the other side, what does the left side equal? What's left over here on the left side?
0.
If I move these two, it's going to equal 0. And then we'll have our 18x squared. And what happens to the 48x when we move it to the other side? Becomes negative 48x. And the negative 32 becomes positive 32. So that was step 1. We got it in standard form. Step 2. What is step 2? Yeah, we're going to take out the GCF. Instead of factoring out the GCF, we're going to divide it here, so we don't have to worry about it. So what's the GCF between 18, 48, and 32? Does 4 go into 18? No. 2. So what we're going to do, we are going to reduce the equation. So we're going to divide everything in this equation by 2. Because for the 18 method, I don't want to do 18 times 32. So we're going to reduce the equations down by dividing out the GCF. So what's 0 divided by 2? 0. What's 18x squared divided by 2? 9x squared. Negative 48 Negative 48x divided by 2. Negative 24x and 32 divided by 2. What's half of 32? 16. Now, it's still bigger than a 1x squared, so we'll still have to do the AC method. It just won't be quite as bad, because 9 times 16 is a lot better than 18 times 32. So what is 9 times 16? 144. The factors for 144. I could do 1 times 144, but that won't give me a 24. 2 times 72, that won't work. Think a little bit bigger. What? Yes, 12 times 12. What's 12 plus 12? 24, but what do we need? Negative 24. To make both of these negative. So bring down the 9x squared. We're splitting up the negative 24x. So that would be negative 12x and negative 12x, and then the plus 16. Once we have our 4 terms, what do we do next? Group them, so group the first 2, group the last 2, and keep a plus sign in the middle. What's the GCF for the first group? 3x, and what goes in the parentheses? 3x minus 4. The second group, the first term is negative, so the GCF is automatically negative what?
4.
Negative 4. And what would go in the parentheses? 3x minus 4. Now, write down your common binomial factor. What's the common binomial factor? 3x minus 4. And the GCF? 3x minus 4. All of that work, and that's just step 3. What is step 4? Set those factors equal to 0. What do you notice about these factors? They're the same, so I'm just going to do it one time. And what would be the first step to solve that equation? Add 4 to both sides. So 4 equals 3x. And divide both sides by 3, and x is equal to 4/3. 4 over 3. Okay, to save time, we are going to skip number 10. And we are going to move to the back page, and we are going to talk about the general projectile function. Or most commonly, we call it the height function. So if you are talking about a falling object, or kicking an object into the air, anything that's soaring through the sky, this is the function we're going to use to follow the path of the object. So the height function is h of t is equal to negative 16t squared plus b sub 0t plus h sub 0. So what you need to know is v stands for what? Velocity. So v sub 0 means your initial velocity. What does initial mean? The starting velocity. I missed an I. No, I didn't. It's right there. There we go. Initial velocity. And then at the very back, h sub 0, that is your initial height. The initial height would be your starting height. So what was the starting height of the object? And we are going to use that equation or that formula to solve these word problems. So number 11, it says a soccer ball is kicked from ground level with an initial velocity of 32 feet per second. After how many seconds will the ball hit the ground? So if we're talking about a ball flying into the air, and we're talking about its velocity, we need to use this general projectile function. So the equation we're going to use is that formula h of t equals negative 16 t squared plus v sub 0 t plus h sub 0. Now h of t, this h of t is going to be the height that you're looking for. And if we look at the problem, they want to know after how many seconds will the ball hit the ground. So when that ball hits the ground, what is its height going to be? How many feet from the air would it be if it's on the ground?
0.
Its height would be 0. So the height we're looking for is 0. So when the ball is on the ground, its height is 0. So we'll have the negative 16 t squared plus, what did I say the v meant? Velocity, and what was the velocity? 32 feet per second, so that would be 32 for the velocity. And h sub 0 represents the initial height. And they told us the soccer ball is kicked from where? Ground level. So if the soccer ball started on the ground, what was the initial height? 0. If it's on the ground, its height is 0. Do I really have to put plus 0? No, you don't have to put the plus 0. Because the initial height was 0, you don't have to put the plus 0. Now we have a quadratic equation to solve. So step 1, is that in standard form? Yes. Step 2, is there a GCF we can pull out? What's the GCF? 16. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to divide by the GCF. So that we don't have such big numbers, divide out the GCF. But if the first term is negative, let's divide out a negative 16. So what's 0 divided by negative 16? 0. What happens with these negative 16? They cancel, so bring down the t squared. And with 32t, oh, it wasn't, I messed up.
You don't have any eraser like here.
The GCF wasn't negative 16, what was it? Negative 16t. So factor out the GCF, negative 16t. So 0 divided by negative 16t is still 0. But what's t squared divided by t? T. And here the t's cancel with 32 divided by negative 16. Negative 2. Solve for t, what would we do? Add 2 to both sides. And what's the time? 2, and the units are? Second. So 2 seconds would be the time. Well, we could do it. Yes, I can use it.
I hate physics.
Yeah, this is.
I barely passed it.
Okay, number 12, suppose you toss a baseball directly upward with a starting velocity of 46 feet per second from a starting height of 6 feet. When will the ball hit the ground? So we're talking about a falling object. We're talking about velocity. So we'll use our height function, or general projectile function, which is h of t, equals negative 16 t squared plus v sub 0 t plus h sub 0. H of t is the height we're looking for. So if they are looking for when was the ball on the ground, what is the height if it's on the ground? 0. So the height we're talking about is 0. Then we'll have the negative 16 t squared. What does the v stand for? V stands for velocity. The velocity was 46t. And h sub 0 is the starting height or initial height. What was the initial height? 6 feet. So 6. Step 1. Is that in standard form?
Yes.
Yes. Step 2. Is there a GCF I could divide out? 16, 46, and 6 are all even, so we can divide by 2, and if the first one is negative, then it's a negative 2. So divide out the GCF. What is 0 divided by negative 2? 0. A negative divided by a negative becomes positive 8t squared. What is 46t divided by negative 2? Negative 23t. And 6 divided by negative 2? Negative 3. So step 2, we took out the GCF. Step 3, how would I factor that? The AC method. So I need to multiply 8 times negative 3 with 8 times negative 3. Negative 24, so I could have negative 1 times 24, negative 2 times 12, negative 3 times 8, negative 4 times 6, negative 6 times 4, negative 8 times 3, negative 12 times 2, negative 24 times 1. What do we have to add up to? Which pair adds to negative 23? Negative 24 and 1. So this would be 8t squared. Split up the middle term. This needs to be negative 24t plus t minus 3. After we have the 4 terms, what's next? Group them. Group the first 2. Group the last 2. What's the GCF for the first group? 8t. What goes in the parentheses? T minus 3. What's the GCF for the second group? 1. What goes in the parentheses? T minus 3. So what's the common binomial factor? T minus 3. And the GCF would be 8t plus 1. All of that work was just on step 3. What is step 4? Set the factors equal to 0. So t minus 3, set it equal to 0. 8t plus 1, set it equal to 0. So what is the first answer? T equals 3 seconds. And the second answer, to solve for t, what would be our first step? Subtract 1 to both sides. That gives us 8t equals negative 1. Divide both sides by 8. What is the second answer? Negative 1/8 seconds. Now, usually with the word problems, if you get 2 answers, usually one is correct and one is not. So if we're talking about time, here we have 3 seconds and negative 1/8 seconds. Which one is not the correct answer? Negative 1/8. Why is that a false answer? Time cannot be negative, so our answer is positive 3 seconds. We're stopping there.